Morning everybody, it's Claire here from Sewn by Claire again, and this morning we're going to carry on with the Upton dress that we started cutting out last night, well finished cutting out last night. I'm actually sat outside at the moment and I can tell there's a bit of road noise, so hopefully it's not going to be too distracting and I'm going to carry on anyway and hopefully everything's going to be okay and you can hear me. I've not said anything too important just yet. Just so that you know, this is my Adrienne blouse that I'm wearing here, that's self-made. Really comfy in this kind of weather when it's warm but not so warm and you just need a bit of coverage. I do like the way that it doesn't gape when I lean over as well, so I thought that was quite relevant for today's video as well. So just to say, it is a lovely day here. I'm sat outside, hopefully. It's not normally as noisy as this, but always the same when you start filming. So we're going to move on to the next stage of our Upton dress. So last night you joined me as we were doing our cutting out with our pattern, and I've now cut out the lining, the silk organza and the top fabric. So I've done that for each of the bodice pieces. I'm only using the silk organza on the bodice pieces just to give it a bit more structure. I haven't notched anything as yet because what I'm going to do next is going to join the silk organza and the top fabric together in order to make it into one piece, and that will then make it more stable for when we're actually working with it to make our garment. It'll just hold the shape better, it won't gape on the neckline, just won't feel quite so flimsy. So anyway, let's get on with that and I'll show you what to do with that. Okay, so I've just moved the camera down so you can just see what I'm working on. I'm just going to take out the pins holding all three pieces together, all three sets of fabrics together. Pattern weights do come in handy for this part as well because we've obviously got flimsy fabrics that can fly away. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to just double check and make sure that we've got the right side of our fabric up. One side will be brighter, one side will be duller. And there's not a lot in it, but I'm going to have mine as this way round as being my top side. So let's turn them round so they're both bottom sides up. And then we're going to take a corresponding piece of silk organza and lay it on top of each piece. Just pins that, hold that still. And this one here. So the silk organza goes on the underside, the underneath, so that you're not going to see it. It's just there for structure. Just make sure your pattern pieces fit as best as you can do. And then put in just a few pins just to anchor it. Just don't want it flying away on us in this, as we're outside. Okay, and same on this one. And people might know about underlining already. If you use underlining with something that crinkles and wrinkles very easily, creases, then it can help with that. It can also help with structure, so like this is a really floaty fabric, but with having the silk organza underneath it, it definitely gives it some stability. I'll just keep those bits there. So I've just got some thread. You can actually get basting thread, which would be perfect. I haven't got any of that at the moment. I am going to look at getting some. Fran Lindsay uses it all the time. Basting thread actually has a lower breakage point, so it means that when you start to pull it out of your pieces, your fabric pieces, then it just means that the thread gives way, not your sewn stitches. So I've just got a single length of thread, and all I'm going to do is just start at one side here, making sure that it's lovely and straight and flat. I'm just going to do just big gathering stitches. Now this is quite a slow, mindful process, and I won't make you sit through all of it, but it's just to stitch these together and just to hold them together. Come on threads, cooperate, that's it. And what you're aiming for is for your stitches to be as flat as possible. So obviously we don't want it to interfere with where we're working, and if we just do it in the seam allowance, we can safely remove the stitches afterwards without spoiling our stitches. Machine sewn stitches, that is. Okay, it looks a bit ham-fisted, but you're trying to not pull your fabric too much. that's the first little bit done. So that's the size of the stitches that I'm doing, if you can see the white thread down here. Okay, just going to leave a little loop as I just change direction, because I don't want to pull this thread too tight. The whole idea is that it's just a loose basting thread. Put those pins on that one so it doesn't blow away. Take your pins out as you go. We've got everything now. We've had cars, we've had vans, now we've got an aeroplane. We don't normally hear them. Isn't that always the case when you wanted some peace and quiet and doing some filming? But if the sound on this is too bad, then I'll just not worry about filming outside. It's just such a nice thing to do though, if it's a nice day in the garden. So just change direction, left a little loop at the edge just to give me some slack to work with. And what I'll do afterwards is I'll show you how much difference this actually makes to the fabric. I'm just laughing because all the cars, it was beautiful in the half an hour before I started filming. Lovely and quiet, just the birds. More stitch into the corner, spin it round, take the last needle thread out. Now you do need to make sure that when you're doing this, if your right side and your wrong side of your fabric are very, very similar, just make sure that when you are making your pattern pieces that you have two mirrored images. Because if you're not careful, this is a very easy place where you can end up with two left sides or two right sides rather than one of each. And if you've done it before, you know how annoying it can be, so just bear that in mind while you're doing your stitching. Last stitch here, okay. Just anchor my needle down, pull the thread away. Okay, so this is what we've got. So it doesn't look very different to the original piece, does it? But on the one side we've got the silk organza, the two edges. Just see just there, look, the two edges. And that's now one pattern piece. So if I hold this one up, just take the pins out of this one for a second, just to show you the difference. Because it's all about this structure that we're looking to create. So if I hold up this piece, see how flimsy it is. And if I hold up this piece now, see that that's much stiffer, it's not folding in on itself. And then going forward, we'll treat this piece just as being, each piece as just being one single piece of fabric. When we sew it together, it's all just going to stay the same. And those little, see the little stitches, just nice big stitches. So I'm just going to carry on and just do the other pieces now, making sure that nothing blows away. And also, by laying my fabrics down, I will just make sure that I have two mirrored pieces. Try and move this out so I can see. Wrong way. Two mirrored pieces rather than two pieces the same. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so now we've got those two pieces done. I'm going to put them right sides together. Make sure they match perfectly. Because the next thing that I'm going to do is mark the notches. Oh, need the lining as well. I'm just making a pile of all the different pieces, make sure not to lose my pattern piece over the hedge. Just put a couple of pins in as I get each point anchored down just to hold it for me. Pattern piece can go on top, pinning through all of the pieces. Also make sure that way that I don't actually cut through any of my pattern pins. And then I'm just going to use my snips. I'm just going to make some little snips in by each of the making sure not to go through the seam allowance. Little snips just like that. Okay. So that's one piece done. I'm going to continue on with the rest of my pieces. I'll give you a rest from my noise whilst I do that, and I'll come back to you once we've made some more progress. Okay, so I've just finished tacking all of my silk organza onto my pattern pieces, and I still like to know where I am. So another tip that I've got is once you've got all of your things cut out, I just put one pin through each pattern piece, just holding it together, and then I just make a little stack of those. Especially useful on things like this piece here, where you can get confused with the orientation of it. Or what it is if you've got facings and things like that. So again, it just helps. So I've just got my lining, my top fabric with the silk organza onto it, my pattern piece, and just one pin just holding all of that together. So that's got a nice little pile of those going on. Put those to one side. Make sure I've got something to weight that down because the wind keeps blowing everything away. Okay, so the next thing then I'm going to do now is look at my skirt pieces. These are quite big, so hopefully you'll be able to see what we're doing with these. Oh, just on those bodice pieces as well, I have just notches as well, just by layering everything up and then putting it back down again and layering that together. So let's see if we can get this to work for us. Now my lining for my skirt on the skirt back wasn't quite wide enough, so I'm going to just make some of the pleats a little bit smaller on that. So I made sure that I'd got the straight edge and I'd also made sure that the curved edge was still the same, so I've got still the same shaping to it for my skirt, which is going to be the hip seam here. But the seam that the zip, that's just a straight down seam, so I've just left that one slightly short. I think it's about an inch short, but I can easily alter the pleats on the skirt to make sure that that still sits, and I still have enough fullness in it to be able to fit okay. But that was I didn't have enough lining fabric to be able to cut another piece at a full length if I had folded my fabric out singly. So that's just a little thing that we'll talk about as I go through. So I have got my fabric for my skirt, and what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to tailor tack these to tell me where the pleats are going to be. I normally put a little snip on the top seam, and then I put a tailor tack at the bottom of the pleat, and I'm going to tack those pleats down as well when I come to making my skirt, because again I've found that in the past if you tack your pleats down, sorry, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to my fabric. If you tack your pleats down, it just means that they don't then twist or try and open up, and we'll just put a loose tacking thread through, and once that waistband's been sewn on and we're happy with the placement and the fit, we can just pull out those tacking threads, and that will just make the skirt, the pleats sit really nicely. So what I'm going to do now is just put my pattern piece back onto my fabric, and it goes the way around. Hold on a second. Don't blow away fabric. Just going to move my lining out of the way for the moment. So I'm going to work with the lining and the fabric separately for this. I'm going to have the waist seam facing me. Just make sure you get your orientation correct. Oops. Pattern pieces all over the place. It's the trouble working outside, but it's just so nice, isn't it, that you just can't resist. Just repinning the pattern to my fabric. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is mark where each pleat is on the top with a snip. Okay, and I'm going to thread my needle. I'm going to put a tailor tack at the bottom, so there's about a 3-inch line that is for the pleat. So I'm going to just make tailor tacks at the bottom of each of those pleats, and that will just show me. So just make a tailor tack, use my thread double but without a knot. Take a bite through at the bottom of your pattern pieces. Oh, you can't see very well because of the sun, can you? Sorry, I'll have to move inside and show you this. And then you just go back in again around there to make a little cross. So like when you're marking dots, pull your threads through, leave them quite long because you've got to cut them off through both sides. Snip through the loop and slip your thread off. And I think what I'll have to do is move inside because it's just too bright and you can't see what I'm doing. So just bear with me and I'll be back with you in a moment.